Good evening, and welcome to the City of Dublin Architecture Review Board meeting. Our in-person meeting is taking place here at 5555 Perimeter Drive. You can also access these meetings via the live stream on the city's website. We welcome public participation, including public comments on cases. In order to submit any questions or comments during the meeting, please use the form under the streaming video on the city's website. Your questions and comments will be relayed to the board by the meeting moderator. Please provide a valid name and address when submitting your comments. The meeting procedure for each case will begin with a staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. Then the board will have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions of the staff and the applicant prior to hearing public comments. Following the period for public comments, the board will then deliberate on each case. I'd like everyone to rise. We start our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lori, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Alexander?
Here.
Ms. Cram?
Here.
Mr. Cotter?
Here.
Ms. Cooper?
Here.
Mr. Jewell?
Here.
Thank you. Before we vote to accept the documents, we've had a conversation up here about changing the agenda order this evening, because there are some cases this evening that will have, we feel, a lot less discussion than others. I think we're going to adjust so that case number 1 will now be case number 5. So we're going to hear, and that's to, so we're going to hear, that is case, the Riverview Street case will be case number 5. If there's a motion to approve that, or motion to propose that, and then if it's passed.
I move to approve the amended agenda order.
I second.
Okay, Lori?
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes. And then is there a motion to accept the remainder of the documents and approve the minutes from the meeting of October 20th?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Thanks. The Architecture Review Board is responsible for review of construction, modifications, or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under the provision of the Zoning Code Section 153.170. The board has the decision-making responsibility on these cases. Anyone who intends to address the board on any cases this evening will be sworn in. So I'm going to ask for those of you, anyone who intends to address the board, will you raise your right hand and address in the affirmative? Do you swear to affirm, tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board? Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, when you come up, we will ask you to state your name and address. All right, our first case on our amended agenda this evening will be case number, what was case 2, 5707 Dublin Road. This is a minor project review. This application is a request for an installation of a 72 square foot shed, a historic single-family home on a 0.75 acre site, zone plan unit development, Llewellyn Farms. The site is approximately 300 feet north of the intersection of Dublin Road with Hertford Lane. Ms. Mullinax will be our presenter. So Taylor, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, and good evening. This case is for review and approval of a minor project review for a shed located at 5707 Dublin Road. The 0.75 acre site is highlighted here in yellow and is approximately 300 feet north of the intersection of Dublin Road and Hertford Lane, which is west of the Scioto River. The site is surrounded by single-family residences to the east, north, south, and west. The property is zoned PUD Llewellyn Farms and contains the James Davis House Farm, which is located outside of the Architecture Review District, located on Ohio Historical Inventory and listed in Appendix G, which defers to the Historic District Code. This map here shows a closer view of the property and the rear yard area. The site once contained a spring house and a chicken coop in the rear yard, but has since been demolished without city approval by the previous owner of the home. The main house was constructed in 1840 and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In May of 2021, ARB approved of a minor project for the replacement of windows and a new entry door. So this evening, the applicant is proposing a 72 square foot shed, which will be located southwest in the rear, in the rear yard behind the asphalt parking area. The shed will be erected on top of a gravel foundation, which will meet the existing brick walkway and take place of the previously existing chicken coop location. The shed is set back 24 feet from the southern and side property line and 80 feet from the western rear property line, which meets all required setbacks. The proposed shed is 6 feet wide and 12 feet in length and 7 feet in height, with a gable standing seam, metal roof containing a pitch of 5 to 12, and a 4-inch roof overhang on all sides of the shed. The shed contains a wood double panel door, which is 3 feet wide by 6 feet and 2 inches in height. The shed takes design cues from surrounding historic outbuildings found in the Historic District of Dublin. And lastly, the shed siding is a Louisiana Pacific Smartside Panel, which is an engineered wood and contains a SilverTech radiant barrier technology. This is on the interior of the shed and is a protection layer which aids in the longevity of the material and protects the wood against weather and pests. The shed siding, door, and trim will be painted PPG Southern Breeze, which is in the cream color shown here. The proposed color was chosen to specifically match the stone color of the historic home. And here on the right, we have the LP Smartside Panel product, which is an engineered wood. The proposed roof of the shed will be a galvanized metal and will remain unpainted, taking design cues from contributing outbuildings in the historic district and the principal dwelling's roof on site. The engineered wood product LP Smartside Panel is not explicitly permitted in code. However, the Historic District Zoning Code provides ARB with the latitude to approve of other high-quality synthetic materials through a waiver request. ARB recently approved this product in the district at 24 Darby Street, also the site of the tenant Modern Mail, as well as at the site of 110, 112 South Riverview Street earlier this year. Given the product's quality, material, and construction, staff is supportive of its use on the proposed shed. The waiver criteria is either met or not applicable, and the minor project review criteria is either met with a waiver, or is not applicable. Therefore, planning staff recommends approval of the exterior material waiver and recommends approval of the minor project review with condition that the applicant applies for a certificate of zoning plan approval subject to staff review and approval. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has, and the applicant is here in attendance. Thank you.
Board members, any questions? Okay. Would the applicant? Okay. Is there any public comment? Any questions? I have one question. Maybe the applicant can answer this. This product comes in 4 different finishes. And just so we have it on the record, you do not designate which panel product it is. Is it LP makes this panel with 8-inch, what looked like 8-inch boards, which may be what is drawn. They make it with 4-inch boards. They make it smooth. They make it textured.
It is a textured wood based on the sample that I have received.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
Do we need to approve the waiver first and then the, or, wait, okay, so I move to approve the waiver for the building, for the auxiliary building material.
I second that.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes. All right, now, is there a motion to approve the minor project
I make a
with the one
motion
condition? Okay.
to approve the minor project.
I'll second the motion. I'll second the motion to approve.
Yes.
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 Thank you. You've been approved. All right. All right, the next project this evening is identified as Project 3. It's Modern Male Salon at 24 Darby Street. This is a minor project review. This application is a request for exterior modifications to an existing building, zoned Historic District Historic Core. The 9/10 acre site is southeast of the intersection of Darby Street with Wing Hill Lane. Mr. Ridge will be our presenter. Whenever you're ready, Chase.
Great, thank you. So as was mentioned, this is a minor project review for exterior modifications to Modern Male Salon at 24 Darby Street in the Historic District. The 1/10 of an acre site is highlighted in yellow on your screen. It's located southeast of the intersection of Darby Street and Wing Hill Lane and is zoned Historic District Historic Core. A bit of history, the board may recall that this was before you all in September of this year for a minor project review and a waiver request. The ARB approved the waiver for exterior materials, allowing the LP Smartside siding, as well as the minor project review for exterior building modifications with the following conditions. So specifically, the second one was that all exterior modifications associated with the brick portion, the 1939 portion of the building, come back to the board for approval. So that's really why we're here this evening. Just as a reminder, this is the south elevation, and highlighted in green, or outlined in green rather, is one of the windows in question this evening. So specifically looking at the trim. And then same thing on the west elevation. And the applicant worked with staff to select colors other than what was originally proposed for the first minor project review in September of this year. And so working with staff, we landed on desert stone, which is an off-white for the trim, and then a cavern steel gray color for the trim. And so this evening, the cavern steel is what's proposed for the trim around the 2 windows in question. Again, this material required a waiver at the time that was approved, so this property does not require another waiver for this evening's request. And so with that, this was reviewed against all applicable criteria, and staff is recommending approval this evening with no conditions. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant's also in attendance.
Okay. Is there anything the applicants would like to add? Okay. Okay. Any Anyone here to speak to this project? Okay.
I have a clarifying question. So we approved the siding, and I understand that there would be trim around siding. For the windows that are in the brick, those don't have, I mean, we still have a brick header and footer on those windows. We're not covering up anything, right?
That's correct. So the trim detail will be a like for like, just in the LP material and in that color specifically.
Okay. But we're not trimming out and putting siding around the header and footer or anything on the
Correct.
brick. Just want to clarify. Okay.
Exactly.
Right. That's what I thought. I just wanted, okay, yep.
Is there a motion to approve the minor project?
I'll move to approve the minor project.
I'll second.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes?
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Thank you. You've been approved. All right. The next project is identified as originally identified as agenda item number 4. This is the Donatos at 6 South High Street. It's a minor project review. This application is a request for site modifications for installation of 2 projecting signs, approximately 4.34 square feet in size for an existing restaurant, zoned Historic District, Historic Core. The 0.25 acre site is southeast of the intersection of West Bridge Street with South High Street. Ms. Mullinex will be our presenter. Mr. Taylor.
Hello again. Good evening. This case is for review and approval of a minor project review for 2 projecting wall signs located at 6 South High Street. The 2.5 acre site is highlighted here in yellow and is located southeast of the intersection of East Bridge Street and South High Street. The site is surrounded by commercial properties, including Domino's Pizza to the north, historic residential properties to the east, Keller Williams Realty to the south, and mixed-use commercial to the west. The property is zoned Historic District, Historic Core. So some background on the site here. It is a 2-story commercial structure, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and on the Ohio Historic Inventory, which was constructed in 1832. In December of 2009, ARB approved a sign modification to replace 2 existing projecting signs with 2 new projecting signs for an existing business, much like we are reviewing this case this evening. And it should be noted that the number and the location of the previously approved signs are unchanged with this application. The proposed signage includes 2 projecting double-sided tenant signs. These signs will be hung below each of the existing decorative scroll mounting brackets as previously approved along each of the facades of South High Street and East Bridge Street. The existing projecting signs are featured in the image on the left, and the proposed projecting signs are featured in the image on the right. Both projecting signs are identical and are 4.34 square feet, 25 inches in diameter, and 2 inches thick. The sign is constructed out of HDU panels, which is a permitted sign material in the historic district, and contains a 1/2 inch raised HDU individual letters on the sign copy. The existing bracket arms and light trays will be painted black, and the sign colors are black, white, and red. There's approximately 10 feet from grade to the top of the sign, with about 8 feet and 2 inches of clearance from grade to the bottom of the sign, which meets the minimum 8 feet clearance requirement per code. Overall, the proposed sign faces add character and interest to the building and the streetscape. The colors and the 3-dimensional elements of the sign copy add a sense of liveliness, which are pedestrian in scale and align with the recommendations from the historic design guidelines. The projecting signs will utilize the existing LED lighting, which does not exceed 4 lumens. The external lighting is located within the horizontal light tray shown here. All minor project review criteria is either met or not applicable. And lastly, staff recommends approval of the proposed minor project review with conditions. One, that the applicant apply for and successfully obtain approval of a permanent sign permit through building standards prior to installation. And two, that Sign Vision Co. updates their certificate of liability insurance on record with building standards. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have, and the applicant's in attendance. Thank you.
Does the applicant have anything to add? Okay, all right. Have we had any public comments? No. Okay, all right. Is there a motion to approve? Are you aware of the two conditions? Okay, okay, all right. Is there a motion to approve the minor project with the two conditions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minor project.
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Your project's passed. Thank you. All right. Our next item on the agenda is Tucci's. It's at 35 North High Street. This is a concept plan review. The application is a request for site modifications for the installation of an enclosed outdoor dining structure at an existing restaurant on a .23 acre site zoned Historic District, Historic Core. The site is northwest of the intersection of North High Street with Wing Hill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. Sarah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our representative from the law office is not quite here yet. I am wondering if we could hear 143 South Riverview first.
Okay, all right. Are there any objections? You may get more input if the legal director's here too, so. Okay, thank you. I'm sure the people at Riverview appreciate your flexibility. All right, we'll move to what was identified as number one. Yep. Okay, 143 South Riverview. This is an informal review. This application is a request for the demolition of an existing single-family home and the construction of a new 1.5-story single-family home. The .21 acre site is zoned Historic District, Historic Residential, and is located west of South Riverview Street, approximately 375 feet south of the intersection with Penny Hill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. Sarah?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your flexibility, Board. Appreciate it. This is 143 South Riverview Street. And as mentioned, the site is south of Penny Hill Lane on the west side of South Riverview. It is zoned Historic District, Historic Residential. This is a little bit of a closer view of the site showing the existing house and the detached garage. And the house tonight is being informally requested to be demolished. These photos show the existing house. It's an example of minimal traditional architecture found to be contributing in the elements of location, design, feeling, setting, and association. The applicant provided these existing conditions photos of the structure, and if they speak tonight, I'm sure we'll go through those in more detail. Since we're talking about demolition, For a contributing structure, these are the demolition criteria that we would be using in a formal request situation. I'm providing these for informational purposes tonight. We can come back to them as the discussion moves forward. The adjacent structures include at number 1, a 1.5-story high cottage. At number 2, a modern house of 2 stories. This is directly to the south. The height of that house is approximately 27 feet to the ridge. At number 3 is a modern story or a 1.5-story house to the northeast. And then at 4 and 5 are ranch single-story to directly across and then to the southeast. By way of information, the house that is now built at 185 South Riverview, which would be 2 lots down to the south from this location, was or is built at 31.5 feet to the peak of the roof, just for context. The proposed site plan shows that we have a 0.21 acre site. Again, we're requesting demolition of the existing house. The proposed replacement structure, including the porches, would equal approximately 2,880 square feet, and that is the footprint. The front setback is not met. Currently, it's shown as 14 feet 3 inches, where 20 feet is required. The south side yard may have some building code issues. This house is proposed to be 3 feet away from that property line, so that will need to be investigated later. Lot coverage is described as 37%, where the maximum allowed per code is 45%. These are the front and north elevations. And here we can see the board and batten siding that's proposed. In the gable, the apex of each gable are vinyl shake shingles. A standing seam metal roof is proposed for the front porch area. Asphalt shingles are shown on the remainder of the structure. And the proposed height is 34 feet to the ridge of the roof. And of course, we measure that a little bit differently per the code, and the maximum height is 24 feet allowed in the district. These are the south and rear elevations. Again, that south elevation is where we may have issues with building code compliance. And the roof height is again shown at 34 feet. So the questions that we are proposing to the board for discussion is, number 1, is the board supportive of the proposed demolition of the existing house? And 2, if the board is supportive of demolition, is the proposed site layout supported? 3, is the board supportive of the massing of the proposed house and the architectural design? 4, is the board supportive of the conceptually proposed materials? And then 5, any other considerations by the board? We did receive one letter of concern from a neighbor, which I passed on to all of you. No other comments have been received.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah? Nope. Okay. Would the applicant like to add to that?
My name is Lindy Lyon, and I live at 143 South Riverview Street. And this is my husband, Brad Lyon. We live together.
Okay.
Oh. Do you want to explain our project?
Yeah.
especially this.
Do you want to tell us about, do you have a presentation prepared, or and if not, do you want to tell us about those photos that you submitted? I think that we would all benefit
Yeah,
from.
can we
from
go
hearing
back to
about-
those photos? When we had originally purchased the house, we had a inspection. We're aware of several things with the house. Some deterioration was happening. We were aware, we were, even in considering of what that would take to fix, a lot of these things. If you notice the upper left picture, we have where, it looks like there's some roof failure, water has seeped in and has began to swell that area, and there's definitely gapping happening there. Rodents have since been, I think, getting into that area a little bit. And if you look at some of the pictures, it's hard to tell, but a lot of this, it's basically the foundation's cinder block wrapped in aluminum siding. The aluminum siding is in rough condition. It's kind of hard to really capture that image. You'd really have to be there to see it yourself. Underneath the roof awning, I guess the gutter awning coming out, there's some looks like rot happening underneath the roof side. That was prior to the purchase. We had noticed that, kind of into it. It seemed like it was painted, kind of covered up. We didn't really get to experience that until actually working on some of the gutters and cleaning out some of the leaves. Also, with any type of, and we had considered a lot of renovation thoughts that went into, like, what can we do to get what we wanted out of our home? What could we have done with creating, additional additions or what have you? A lot of the consideration in that and just the utilities even are captured up underneath this crawl space, which I don't think a normal sized man could even fit up underneath this crawl space to even get any type of that work done. Some of the renovations we had inside the house, actually replacing some of the cast iron plumbing, we actually had to demo out holes in the floor even to get underneath to see some of that area. So in consideration of what it would take to do some of these additions and renovations, there's a lot to be had here as far as the crawl space and the utilities up underneath the structure of the home. That's just kind of what I was trying to portray in just some of those details. That the next photo is actually I have a picture of some of the utilities outside. It almost looks as if like some of the ground has, I don't know, somewhat like covered up like some of our utilities. Like it seems like it's like the structure has been sinking a little bit, maybe. I don't know if that's a thing, especially in that area, because considering we have that we have a lot of limestone, underneath that, and it seemed like the ground structure is very stable and wouldn't do so. But especially around the house, it seems like there's definitely some higher elevations of ground clearance happening there. The next picture would be the interior, and this is just showing the kind of the I guess the height of the house. Where I think it's like 7.
Oh, the inside ceilings? Yeah, there's 7 feet or 6 feet.
It's 7 a few inches, and it's just our want is to have higher ceilings, and what that would consider, especially the roofing structure and what should be had with that moving forward in the addition of what we need to do for the space that we'd like to provide in the area.
Board members, any questions yet for the applicants? We'll probably have a few more, so.
Okay.
Okay. Have we had, I know the one letter, and we've all seen that letter. Is there anyone here at the meeting who'd like to speak to this? Tom?
Excuse me, Tom? Excuse me, can you turn on your microphone? Thank you so much.
We need that little sign we talked about. The 5957 Roundstone Place, Tom Holton. This, I didn't see it in the informal, in the project presentation, but it's important to point out that there, I believe this is the site that has a stone wall on the south end of it. Between this and 185, or 175, 179, that stone wall is one of the more historic stone walls. Hard to date these stone walls, but we know that either the site where the site where this house is, or 179 was one of the first 3 schools sites in Dublin. So I imagine that we don't know for sure, but that stone wall may be associated with that early school. We don't know for sure, but we do know where that site was. I'll send a map, a chart, copy of that chart to Ms. Holt, so you'll have it in your records. But I just want to point that out so that whatever is done here, that wall is protected. Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate bringing that to the attention. We plan to absolutely preserve that. We love the wall and would love to see it to even be restored in a way historically to make sure it maintains the characteristic of that history of that wall, for sure.
Okay, thanks. Board members, should we work our way through the questions? Yep. Okay. The first question is how we feel about the demolition of the house.
I would say as far as demolition, we just don't have enough information. Our criteria is very specific that you have to show, economic hardship, and we don't have any data. The pictures you showed, you can easily replace aluminum siding, you can replace gutters, you can replace rotten fascia board. So next time you come, you need to bring quotes you need to bring an inspection report, detailed inspection reports on the state of your utilities and the foundation and your roof, the structure, any structural problems you'll need to bring, how much it would cost to, like I said, replace the things that you listed, which are clearly replaceable. Foundation cracks can be repaired, so it's a matter of getting those quotes to find out how much damage is actually there. It is inconvenient to have crawl spaces, but there's lots of old houses around and lots of people, you can find electricians and plumbers who will crawl in those spaces and do that work for you. So I think you just have a lot more investigation before I can make any decision on whether demolition is acceptable.
The same comment as Amy. It's just hard to see exactly what's the economic hardship. From the criterion that sits in the code, to make sure we understand better what needs to be done to get the house to where it's let's call it where you think it's livable, versus tearing it completely down and replacing it with something else. I think just for me, the code's quite clear, so we just want to make sure when you come back for the looking at that we understand better why it can't be fixed or it's not economically viable to be rehabbed.
Michael, Marty?
I know the property line issues have come up and easement issues too, and it sounds like there's no clear picture of where we are in regards to, where are those property lines defined and the easement issues that may be with the driveways and stuff like that as well. So if we could get some more information in regards to that.
And we'll go through to give them some feedback too on those other items. So we'll talk about the the site layout here in a moment and the massing of the house and that driveway issue too. So there may be some other thoughts on that. How do you feel about the demolition, Marty?
I'm not in agreement either. I think has not been sufficient information. Concentrating on really what would be the cost, and I think your utilities are probably a big source situation, but we don't have any data to support it. Maybe they can't even be repaired. That would be something of significance. So that's where I am on that one.
And I want to give you a little background because I know you see a number of houses being torn down, but let me explain. The code's real specific about what can and can't be torn down easily. And since this is considered a contributing structure to the historic district, then there's a part of the code that outlines financial issues that need to be identified. Since I've been on the board, we've allowed 5 homes to be torn down in the district. 3 of those homes were essentially uninhabitable. They were so bad. They had limited value in terms of a contributing structure because of what earlier owners had done to the properties. So they were really in disrepair. The house across the street from you on Riverview that's slated to come down, that house, which probably has, of all that we've evaluated, the best sort of architectural integrity for its character, the owners came back, had a structural engineer's report, had a lot of documentation about the costs of, and because it's on a hill, that makes it even more complicated to solve foundation issues. So they came back with engineer's report, documentation, costs that identified the difficulty of maintaining that structure. So that's why it was permitted. The house on Dublin Road that recently came down, that house, the board did not consider one a contributing structure to the historic character of the district. So it did not meet the qualifications as a contributing structure. It was also not particularly, and I'm saying this with a smile because one of the applicants is here in the audience, it was not particularly well designed nor well built either. So, and your house is considered a contributing structure. It has features that have been judged to be of merit, and the overall mass of the house hasn't been, from what we can see, hasn't been compromised. So for us to approve it based on our new code, and some of those were approved under the previous code, there's some work that has to be done yet. But I think it's only fair to go through the other items too, because I think if you were to come back with that information, I think then we would want to address those other issues. So let's talk a little bit about the siting and the site plan of the proposed house.
I think Mike already mentioned it. Yeah, you definitely would have to meet the 20 feet in the front, so you'd have to push things back. You probably have to push things a little further north just to meet the setbacks. I wouldn't be in support of any type of waiver, especially if you're building something brand new on the site. Honestly, I'd consider a rear addition. I think that would be a lot easier for you. But yeah, I would say as far as site layout, just meet the code.
No, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I think that Amy is correct on that, it might be better to consider a addition to this property. You don't have to worry about the front easement areas because you are existing, but you also have the opportunity then to maintain and improve a highly contributing property, and I think that's going to be a big concern also with your demolition information. So,
and I would just add to Amy's comment, the house is so close to that south property line that even though your intention may be to preserve that wall, the amount of width that the excavation is going to require for a foundation that close to the wall has the potential to undermine that wall. And also in terms of what it does to that neighbor too. Pushing the house back further on the site, if you were to develop a house like this, gets it off the street, and the house to the south has more height. So your house could potentially be seen as being a little bit more contextual with the house to the south if you were to shift it back closer to an alignment with that, not right at the setback.
I have also a question, and maybe Sarah, you can answer, or the property owner, but I don't remember seeing the distance of the stone wall, how far back onto the property it extends.
I think it's on the south property line.
Pardon me?
I think it's on the south property line.
Correct, but how far, how deep?
All the way. I think
Okay.
it goes all the way back.
Yeah, it goes all the way
All the way
back.
back, yeah. Yep.
Yes.
But maybe just a couple points on the massing of the house, just if I look at, because for me, just looking, sight line, putting it on the right place on the site to make sure it sits with the easement for me is clear. But certainly looking at it, it's hard to tell. I think now we say it's 31 and a half, I think
Yes.
it looked like it was 34 in the staff report, but it was
Said
31.
34.
It is proposed to be 34 feet to the ridge.
So just from the massing, as Gary said, right now the code says 20, it has 27. is
She
it?
said 24.
24
Sorry.
is what's
So,
required
for
by
me, trying to
code.
get the massing, getting it lower try to get it closer to the, to the 24 feet. The other ones around you are slightly different than that, but certainly as I look at the front, the massing of the roof, and then if I look at the back, that roof for me is really prominent, especially if it's really close to the street. So trying to understand how that looks in context with the houses around you, especially the ones to the north that are a bit older in that context. So that roof for me looks kind of out of place, just the way it is from the front and the back. And then maybe just looking at it from board and batten all the way around, it could, for me, from a architectural standpoint, could maybe use some break up there. You have the shingles at the top, but having it fully wrapped in board and batten for me might need some adjustment. And then looking a bit at the symmetry of the windows on the side, because some of them have 4 panes. I think one of them was open. So just I know it's conceptual, but just as you think through what the windows look like, how they're kind of, if they would be some more symmetrical or look a bit the same, or have some theme about how you're trying to move at least back to the back of the house.
Yeah, and mainly the roof height as well. I think that's definitely in a mass situation. If we could get that down a little bit, that's definitely very prominent.
The mass is exaggerated when you look at the side elevation, and at least the porches on the front help to reduce the mass of the volume. If you look at the house, now it's a different era of house, but the house to the south, it hides the bulk of the house by having smaller elements attached to the tallest part. So if you were to pursue this, I think more, maybe not another porch, but maybe a bay or some projections on particularly that north side, which will be so visible, would help reduce the significance of that side elevation. When you see that, the house just really looks enormous compared to the others. Sean touched a little bit on the material, the board and batten. I think there was a note that said vinyl windows in an earlier document. Does that mean a vinyl clad wood window or? Vinyl clad wood, okay. Well, that's good because that's an approved, a window like an Anderson product would be approved. All right, are there any other considerations? Okay, all right. Do you have any questions for us that you feel like we haven't addressed?
So for me, I'm just curious. So we provide, this was just, we were under the impression it was just an informal review to kind of start the discussion, which is great. So we provide, some of the things that you said you would need to see in order to approve a demolition. Is that something that, given we provide all the, all the things that are relevant to that process could go quickly, or is that something that you would vote on? I'm just curious what the process looks like for, let's say we have a structural engineer come and all these things that we need that we present next month. Are we willing to vote next month on something, or I'm just trying to understand the process with a growing family and, all those things really matter for us right now.
We would, if you submit any information by the deadline prior to the meeting, we'll act on it at the meeting. Now, just because you submit the information doesn't mean everyone's going to agree with that information, or we're not going to judge it as being typical changes that need to be made to a remodeled home. So, it needs to meet a standard that we think is onerous to you, and that would require demolition. So it's not a matter of just submitting information, here it is. We need to judge that information to see if it is substantial enough that then, so I don't want you to have the feeling that it's just filling out an application and submitting it and we rubber stamp it. So, and I think the staff can help you because the code, it's a little tricky where to find it in the code. And then I think the staff can help you saying, this is what you need. You're going to need more information. You need a licensed professional to review this. So, but if you meet deadlines and, the staff has to review things, write a report. If you meet the deadlines that are required for meetings, we'll address it if we can at that meeting.
Okay. I also wanted to note that I know we didn't discuss the critical email that came in about not wanting it, and I was told that favorable support and public comments did not matter in a residential demo. And if that's not the case, I would like our neighbors who have shown favorable support in it their voices to be heard as well.
And the board is going to evaluate and that's great. All the comments you want would be fine. But the board's going to evaluate that on the merits of the code and the merits of the information, okay? So, and we have some professionals up here who have probably a little bit more experience in these issues sometimes than people who write us letters. So we do listen to them, we do evaluate them, but it's not an election. So, we're not going to approve something based on getting 4 letters that like the project and, one doesn't. That's not the way we would work.
Yes.
Okay.
Would it be okay, since we're here, if a few people said, I think it'd just be easier to add on. That was definitely something we looked at in the beginning, and we kept hitting walls like, oh, that won't work, even through architects and builders. And we have our builder here today. Would you guys be willing to talk to him about what an addition, like what you would suggest for an addition that would actually work for our property?
Well, it's difficult to do that in the context of a meeting like this. And I'm not sure it's fair to other applicants too, because we need to see something, and there wasn't even a floor plan. And we don't require you to put the floor plan in, but it's hard for us to even make comments about, you might do this or you might do that. I will say, and Amy's suggestion is a common strategy with the historic homes in the area has been to add additions that go back behind the house that don't extend beyond the sides of the house if possible. So it's been a common strategy that a lot of the homes have employed. But for us to say, this will work, this won't work, without seeing something proposed, you might talk to a design professional who's had a lot of experience doing that.
And I would suggest talk to staff as well, because they can give you our historic design guidelines that talk about additions to historic properties and how they have to be subordinate to the original property. So you're not going to get away with a 2-story rear addition when you have a 1-story house. So
yes, I'm just concerned about what would be subordinate to our current, 1,000 square foot home. That's with the addition, it's not even, it's like 900. The addition was added on probably in the 70s or something. So I guess I'm just wondering reasonably if there is, what could you reasonably do to make our add-on a subordinate add-on to the original that would be feasible for a family,
That would be a question for an architect, I mean, for your designer.
I've heard you, Ms. Cram, make suggestions in other meetings, so I just didn't know if that was a possibility.
Demolition is a hard bar to reach. So what I was suggesting is if you can't get that bar, you probably could get at least a one-story, you could get a room or two addition on the back to get a little bit more space than you want in that. But it would have to be subordinate to, like Gary said, usually the height's it's going to be lower than the front of the building. It's going to be brought in from the sides of the building or stepped back. But your designer should be able to, and then you can work with staff too.
Subordinate doesn't always mean smaller.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the important thing. When you hear the term subordinate and you see that in our code, it doesn't mean the addition has to be smaller. Okay, and you do have a challenge because what we talk about at scale of your house is kind of diminutive. I mean, it doesn't have big columns like this building does. So, but there are ways to increase the footprint significantly and still have the addition just placing at the rear, having the addition be subordinate to
And
the
it might be
house.
something as separating it. We've seen them like with a hyphen, like you actually like have an enclosed hallway that would separate it to another building that sits behind. There are ways you can be creative.
Yeah, just such a narrow, small lot for, not being able to mess with the roof lines and everything. Feels a little bit like we're
Well,
throwing rocks in.
speaking just for myself, but I think there may be others that could support this. I think you may have more luck getting a variance to increase lot coverage slightly to build a larger house that was sensitive to the original house than knocking this down and trying to build a two-story structure. I think there could be some flexibility based on just the lot size that you have and the limits. It's clear the way your driveway functions, that's a result of the lot size. I mean, so I think there can be some flexibility, but it needs to be, merited. I mean, that's clearly better than taking the house down, so.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just summarize a couple comments so it's a little bit easier. I think it's pretty clear without more documentation of the hardship, financial documentation of the hardship of keeping the house. We can't yet support the demolition of the house. I think we have questions about encroaching in the front setback. I think all of us aren't comfortable with that and wouldn't support a variance for that. Suggestions that you might shift the house back at least behind the setback and maybe away from the wall to a little bit more to the north. I think we all have concerns about the massing and the exceeding the height limit. The material, the board and batten, having the house of entirely board and batten except the upper parts of the gable just reinforces the mass, and I think we're uncomfortable with that. And I think those are our general comments. So, okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Are we ready for? Yeah, actually, there was one suggestion that we make you aware of. You can come back with informal plans or concept plans that might be prepared by a design professional for you. So you don't need to have a full set of drawings or renderings to come back and talk to us. So if you have ideas, things you want to bounce off us before going to the extent of having a full set of drawings done, you're welcome to do that. Now, it may take a few more meetings, but it may be less resources too for you. Yeah. Right, we're going to move to our final case this evening, and that is I'm looking for the form, here it is. Okay, I'm looking for the formal case number. This is Tucci's at 35 North High Street. It's a conceptual plan review. The application is a request for site modifications for the installation of an enclosed outdoor dining structure at an existing restaurant on a .23 acre site, zoned historic district, historic core. The site is northwest of the intersection of North High Street with Wing Hill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. So Sarah.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Board. This is indeed Tucci's patio enclosure. It's a concept plan and waiver request. The site is at the northwest corner of Wing Hill and North High Street, and the zoning is Historic District, Historic Core. This is a little bit closer view of the site, and we're actually going to be talking about the east portion of the site where the patio is shown in this particular aerial photograph. So the most recent project history has to do with the pandemic, and a temporary tent was constructed in November of 2020 to allow patron seating and social distancing. The time limit for these emergency measures will expire on February 28th of 2022 per an extension actually from City Council recently approved. The applicant is requesting to keep a version of their temporary tent permanently. And this is per the project narrative, which you have in your packets. So previous requests that are pertinent to this application include a lot coverage and parking variance granted in 2002. This was way back when these types of requests went to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then more recently, we've had various informal requests which have not been pursued. A little bit of history on the zoning, and we're going to go from the biggest topics honing into the more specific here, so please bear with me. In 2012, the Bridge Street District Historic Core zoning was approved, and this allowed existing non-conforming buildings to remain legal. And it also had a provision to allow these buildings to be expanded. And in 2021, when the historic district was put into its own zoning, if you will, the same provisions carried over. So both this business and the building fall under those provisions. Now to look at the code requirements, and there are actually 3 separate code sections that apply to this request. The Historic Dublin Code allows this restaurant to remain, as we've just discussed, and even to be expanded. It's been at this location since 1997. So the request as presented by the applicant would create a restaurant totaling 6,120 square feet approximately. Now, the City of Dublin Code speaks to accessory structures. And this is an accessory structure request. I'll explain that next on the next slide. That section of the code talks about allowing an accessory structure to be a maximum of 25% of the gross floor area of the primary structure. Therefore, that would allow 1067 square feet. There's also a provision that accessory structures have a maximum height of 18 feet. And finally, the Historic Dublin Waiver Code allows the board to grant up to an additional 20% of any numeric code that exists. And if we took the allowed 1067 square feet, allowed per the accessory structure requirements, and we added 20% to that, we could get to a structure of 1,280 square feet. That size is recommended as a condition of approval. So now we get to the difference between an accessory structure and a building addition, and it's important to look at these different criteria, different categories, because they're very different in what's allowed. As we've said, an accessory structure is allowed to be up to 25% of the primary building square footage. On the other hand, a building addition is allowed to be up to 50% of the existing building square footage, and this is per the 2012 rezoning criteria. An accessory structure is unattached to the primary structure. There's no wall connection, there's a separate roof, there's no floor. I'm sorry. Why we're saying that this is an accessory structure is because it is not attached to the primary building with any walls, separate roof, or continuous roof, or a built floor. And we'll look at that in a moment as well. If we were looking at a building addition, it would be attached to the primary structure, and it would be through maybe an enclosed hyphen, as we've talked about with other projects. And in this particular case, we might be looking at an architectural design that is similar to the existing building, using brick and similar window patterns and all of those typical kinds of construction techniques. This is the proposed site plan, and again, we're looking at an accessory structure of approximately 1,869 square feet in its existing location as shown in the blue square here. It's concurrent with the outdoor patio. You can see the tables and chairs kind of through the graphic here. The proposal is also to maintain the existing entry point on the north side off of the public sidewalk. And then an entry point on the south side appears to be closed per a sign at the door, and we have photographs of that. This is the existing condition along North High Street. And you see the tent here that is permitted through those executive orders because of COVID-19. And the space, again, has been in use this way since 2002. The photos show the existing conditions from North High with the former patio entry highlighted with the arrow and then shown in greater detail on the smaller photo. A recommended condition says to reinstate this entry so that we can have more activity on North High Street. This also shows the character of the existing landscaping, and a condition of approval requires more evergreen landscaping to help meet both code and guideline criteria. And then also please note the vinyl gable, which is also addressed through a recommended condition of approval. This is the current main entry on the north side of the property, located off of the public sidewalk. And again, you can see how the tent structure is separate from the existing brick building with no walls, no floor other than the exterior hardscape, and then the roofs overlap and are not integrated. To the sides of the property, the HVAC is visible from both North High Street and the public sidewalk on the north side. The recommended condition of approval for evergreen plantings would help address that situation. And again, it appears that the south side entry is not in use. The applicant provided some inspiration photos of both vinyl roofs and standing seam metal roofs. Vinyl is not an allowed material in the district. We didn't include that in the formal part of the presentation, but we do have that slide at the end if anybody wants to see that. Staff is recommending that this would be the roof material, the standing seam, using colors that blend and harmonize with the existing brick building. And then the historic district code requires a minimum roof pitch of 612, and a condition of approval addresses that as well. Our chief building official also provided comments on the project, and these are specifically answering the question of what potential issues might there be from going from a temporary structure to a permanent structure. So the comments that were provided include that revised engineering calculations will be needed to ensure that the structure can handle a metal roof. Building standards would want information from the manufacturer regarding the performance of the structure in a long-term installation. And just for informational purposes, there may be possible energy compliance issues and possible occupancy, egress, and fire sprinkler issues. And it's just important for the applicant to note that. So the concept plan review criteria have either been met or met with the conditions that are proposed. And then the waiver review criteria have either been met or met with the conditions proposed. The first criteria is that the request is not caused by a unique site condition, or it is caused by a unique site condition out of control of the owner. And that has not been met, although the owner has provided information on how the temporary tent has really positively affected his business. And that was explained in the project narrative. So planning staff is recommending approval of the accessory structure waiver with the following condition. The structure shown on the preliminary final development plan shall not exceed 1,280 square feet based upon the gross floor area of the existing restaurant. Should additional confirmed data indicate a different gross square footage for the existing building, that data may be used to recalculate the maximum structure square footage. Then for the concept plan itself, staff is recommending approval with the following conditions. A surveyed site plan shall be provided at the subsequent submittal that demonstrates how all setbacks and lot coverage are met. The roof pitch shall be shown at 612, not to exceed 18 feet in height. The roof material shall be standing seam metal in a compatible color and finish. An entrance shall be shown off of North High Street. The applicant shall identify evergreen foundation plantings to screen the structure and the HVAC system. And all details of window and door systems, along with colors, materials, finishes, and cut sheets need to be provided, noting that vinyl is not a permitted material in the district. Colors, again, are to be harmonious with the existing building. The applicant shall provide details of a more permanent, high-quality material for the gable ends. And finally, the applicant shall provide information on all furniture, lighting, and other elements within the transparent portion of the structure. And I'll answer any questions.
I just want to ask one clarifying question for everybody here, that a review tonight is essentially just the concept. We're establishing parameters, but this could come back to us looking very, very different, which is fine. We're just establishing if we do approve this, we're just establishing some parameters to move forward.
That is correct.
Because the building, issues with the building code may have as much or more impact on what it looks like than the parameters we establish. So I just bring that up so that, you know, we don't feel like we have to determine what the final material is going to be on the siding or the glass to wall ratio, or get into those kind of things tonight. Yeah, okay, thank you.
It's a couple maybe clarifying, just from the city, trying to get the city code versus the executive order or the resolution. Because in what is this, 153-074, so in D2, it talks about, it's an accessory structure, that the accessory structure have the same requirements of the zoning district in which it's located, right? So that's what D says. In the resolution, it talks about they're going to be able to apply for a permit for the structure that's there. I mean, I'm trying to understand if, is that in conflict somehow? I mean, the way I read the resolution was they're applying for something that sits there as what's approved there now, and the code says it has to adhere to the district that it's in. Am I questioning making sense there?
So I think that the resolution you're referring to is the continuation of the executive order.
Yep, correct.
The permit for the existing structure that's referenced in that resolution is simply a permit to renew what was there for the initial phase of the pandemic, but it was not, and in fact is sunsetted in February 2022. But it does not provide any ability for them to apply for a permanent continuation of that structure.
Okay, because it's a bit, so the structure that when they want to try to do something next to it, then D will apply. So the structure will have to be adhering to the zoning requirements of that district.
Right. Once that February 22nd date or
28.
Once February 28th, 2022 rolls around, nothing in that resolution relative to the pandemic will have any force moving forward.
The only thing that at the end
Back
is
to
saying is
chapter
that,
153.
because I'm trying to understand what they're saying, there's a certain date by which you have to apply for a permit, I think it says in here, and I have to read it again. So I'm just trying to understand what's that permit? What are they trying to apply for now to be inside of that resolution, that they wouldn't have come back just under trying to do this under normal zoning application?
So the applicant is requesting that this structure remain permanently. The permit that's referenced in the resolution was just to extend the temporary condition that was allowed for purposes of dealing with the pandemic.
Okay. I think I'm clear. Yep.
So if they do, they have to take this down on February 28th.
Yep.
2022.
Correct. Yep. But nothing in the resolution, I mean, the section D applies to what we're talking about today.
Nothing in the temporary resolution applies to what we're talking about today.
Perfect. That's maybe that would have been easier to say for me. That took me a while to get to that spot, but yes. Okay. And then just maybe one more question, just here. So if I look at the code here for the historic Dublin code, so you're allowed to have, so this is saying because they're allowed to expand, the 6120 is inside the code, even though 35, because they're grandfathered with the existing square footage. The new square footage would also be grandfathered because it would be an expansion.
No, that is not what we're saying.
Okay.
And the 4271 is existing and legal.
Yep.
And what is being requested is an accessory structure.
Yep.
It is not a building addition. So we have to go back to the City of Dublin code, which says that allows up to 25% of your gross floor area. If it were a true building addition, theoretically, they could have 50% of their existing square footage. What this is saying here is that what is requested square footage-wise is above and beyond what we can permit. And that's where the recommended condition of approval for the waiver comes in, which is the maximum. It is 120%.
Yeah, I got that. But if somebody with 3,500 came in and they wanted to build something on, they would be allowed to go above the 3,500 that's in the code now, if they had if we approved a building addition or an accessory structure.
They would need a waiver for that.
Right. But you could get a waiver, and it would be inside the code to get that waiver.
Yes.
Okay, now I'm clear.
Okay.
And I believe that when the applicant's turn to address this application comes up, he'll have some things to say about the size and
If there are no other questions from the board, why don't you come on up? Yeah.
Sorry, I got a scratchy throat, so I may be going back for a drink here. So no COVID though. My name is Aaron Underhill. I'm with Underhill and Hodge, and I'm an attorney and representing Craig Barnum and his Tucci's restaurant. My address is 8000 Walton Parkway, Suite 260 in New Albany. So, very interesting case here, I guess, in terms of what the world's been like in the past couple of years and what this exterior structure has meant to this business. It's been extremely important, and I'm going to have Craig get up here in a little while and talk to you about that. And I know while that's not exactly on point of what you have to consider here, I do think it is important to understand what this has added in terms of the vibrancy of the Bridge Street area. And it's been a very popular addition, I think, to the community, and has been a huge success. I'll get some of the procedural items out of the way first. I think that as a starting point, as Mr. Boggs mentioned, we are really in a time crunch because of the sunset of this allowable condition based on that temporary order that was issued. It's a little odd to me that it's happening in the middle of the winter. It's a little unfortunate, but we wanted to get in front of you as quickly as we could so that we expect multiple meetings, and obviously, aside from a concept plan, we have a preliminary and final development plan that we'll have to pursue. So time is of the essence for us. But we are, as a starting point, held to the underlying code that applies here on a permanent basis. Obviously, you have the ability to give waivers, and we can, there are other means by which we can, this is a little outside the box in terms of a use and a structure here. So we anticipate a lot of discussion in that regard. But I was, first of all, Sarah did an excellent job with putting this staff report together. Very complicated to read through this code, and so I compliment her on that. The one item that I, as an attorney, speaking as an attorney, and I'm about half attorney and half lobbyist here, right? But the one item I was surprised with was the waiver request at this stage, because I had anticipated that at a later stage, and I was having a sidebar with both Sarah and Mr. Boggs here earlier about really not wanting that to be considered tonight, that request. And I'd like to bring that request back if we would get to a preliminary / final development plan. We anticipate, because of the time constraints we have, bringing those two applications together if we get past this phase. And I think it's appropriate to deal with it then. So what I would like to do is withdraw that. I didn't really necessarily in the application itself make that waiver request, if you noticed, because I thought it was premature. But if we could have a conversation this evening, and I'll let Mr. Boggs weigh in, not steal his thunder, but if we could have a conversation on the aesthetics and some of the other items tonight and get your feedback and vote on that, we'd prefer to bring that other item back later. I happen to think that I could interpret the code differently, this is what lawyers do, right? But I could interpret the code to give you the authority to give us a little more square footage and the square footage we need with this existing structure. But I do need some time to convince Mr. Boggs and the staff of that. And so that's what I'd take the time to do. So I'll leave it to you to see if you have any objections, Mr. Boggs, to us withdrawing that request and bringing it back later.
Right. And having consulted with Ms. Holt, we have no objection to bringing the waiver request back and continuing to work with them to, ascertain what form that will ultimately take. I think that if the board decides to move forward with approval of this concept plan with whatever conditions, I would include as a condition just a reference to that continuing evaluation that we're undertaking.
Sure.
Everybody okay with that? Okay.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for indulging me on that. That's the boring part. So obviously, this structure, it's significant, even though it has, we're calling it a tent, but really it's much more than a tent. If you've been in it, has a lot more of a permanent feel. In fact, I was having a sidebar with Craig here earlier, and don't have exact numbers given that, there are a lot of purchases that were made by the restaurant in addition to the structure itself, including furniture and other items. But this was about a $350,000 to $400,000 investment, and it has meant a lot to not only his bottom line, but it has allowed him to employ a lot of staff members, and it's been a great success and has allowed his restaurant to really survive through COVID. As a part of this, we recognize that there are going to be some enhancements that need to be made to this. Our intent is to keep the same structure in place, but use the bones of it as a baseline and enhance this with. We agree that a standing seam metal roof would be appropriate. We think with some color changes, doesn't have to be white, but we'll work with the board and the staff to identify colors that are appropriate to kind of allow this to blend with the building, existing building there. We are inclined and are offering to enhance the frontage on High Street with some more permanent and substantial windows. And in general, we agree with all of staff's comments and recommendations in terms of enhancements to landscaping, et cetera. We're willing to entertain the idea of a door along the frontage. We think operationally it could cause us some problems. I don't know if there would be some ability to even provide that as an aesthetic feature, but not necessarily. We have to put some thought into whether or not operationally that causes us any issues. But all of that, I think, is certainly doable, and we can accommodate. And we're open to improving this structure in a way that makes it appropriate for the area. And we here again, I think when I walked up and down the street today, and certainly the original building itself is set back a good distance from the street. And while the patio has been there, I think that, really, at least having a defined edge there, not having this missing tooth and having a structure there really adds to the feel of the area. And here again, no one can debate the vibrancy that it's brought to the area. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig and have him talk a little bit more about how this has affected his business and how important it is. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Craig Barnum, 35 North High Street. Thanks for having me tonight, giving me the opportunity to speak. And I'd like to start out by thanking Dana McDaniel for allowing me to put the structure up during the pandemic. Patios are a tricky business, so I'm going to start out with a little lighthearted story. Imagine a busy Friday night in the district prior to my structure going up. It's a 3,000 square foot patio without that structure, about 140 seats, beautiful Friday night, and it's been very popular over the years. Let's just say busy night, waiting list inside and out. And as you know, May, June, we have these rogue storms that come through, and let's say a downpour occurs. So you have 140 people that are having dinner, that all pick up their plates and decide to run inside of the restaurant into a full restaurant. It's an absolute disaster. And that it happens usually during the summer, probably at least once or twice. And for an operator, it's an absolute nightmare. So over the years, as an operator, you look at those situations and you ask yourself, how can I improve on those things? I've been a Dublin guy for years. I used to own Oscars in 1995, the Brazen Head in 1998. I currently still own Matt the Miller's in Dublin. Tucci's has been wildly successful. I came to the board in 2020 in January to try to get a similar structure up. At that point, I was denied. And then fast forward in March of 2020, the pandemic hit. And we were closed for about 2.5 months. A lot of hardship, a lot of sleepless nights, staff members out of work, not knowing what to do. We had to pull tables out of the restaurant. We had to remove booths. Patio tables, removing 6 feet of distance and so forth. So Tucci's was one of the restaurants we'd had, obviously for 25 years. The minute we could open up, I think it was May 21st, the inside and outside of the restaurant. When we reopened, we were actually busy. Our clientele and our staff, we did not lose one staff member. I was not very fortunate in some of my other restaurants. And our clientele is very, very loyal there. So the first day we could open up in the state of Ohio, back then, we were very busy from the onset, so I was very blessed there at that location. As the summer drew on, into May, June, July, and August, I realized that once that patio was going to close come in October, and I already lost about 30 or 40% of my seating inside the restaurant, it was a reality that I was probably going to have to close the business because the restaurant inside only seats about 120. And I'd lost about 30 or 40% of my seats. So to kind of go backwards, the hardship that restaurant has gone through since the patio was built in 2003, I lose about 50% of my sales. Now, from a business equation, not many businesses survive from October to about the middle of April and May 1st, losing half of your business. I don't laugh. I have to basically fire some of my staff members. I usually have to terminate 1 or 2 of my managers. It's a significant loss to the restaurant. It's devastating. And when that patio opens back up in May, 140 seats and 120 inside, obviously then it's game on for a few months. I did approach Dana at that point because I had an idea of actually trying to enclose that patio. I got the idea from a few restaurateurs, and this was being built down at the Bud Dairy building down on 4th Street. And O'Neill Tents was doing this with a company from Germany. And so before the Bud Dairy building opened, I went down there on the roof. It was on the rooftop, and I viewed this tent that was going up. Basically, it was just like a structure. They were building a bar and so forth, and the only difference was they had vinyl sides, which I don't. So one thing led to another. I met with Dana, God love him. He said, listen, I'm going to do this for you. And if this is going to mean the difference of you staying open, it's going to help your business. I'm here, I'm going to support you. But just so you know, he was very honest. He said, at the end of the pandemic, you're going to have to go through the approval process if you want to keep the structure up. One of the things I've been very careful is not to call it a tent. We have 12 8-foot concrete footers into the bedrock. This is not a tent, it's a structure. Most patios don't have 12 8-foot concrete footers into the bedrock. So anyway, the structure went up, and this was last November, and it probably took at least 3 or 4 months to figure out the heating of the tent, the acoustics, furniture, landscape. It's more of a greenhouse. We do have acoustical panels at the top that were probably $15,000. So now when people have dinner in there, you can actually have a conversation. Without those, you could not have a conversation. But really, from almost day one, it's been wildly successful. I probably could have had 50 or 100 Dublin residents in here tonight talking about it. Didn't want to bore you with that, but overwhelmingly, it's been wildly successful. I mean, even tonight, on nights when it snows or there's storms, we're busier outside than we are inside. I've created a monster outside where people would rather be outside than they are inside. So, which is great. And I think, from the district standpoint, obviously, I've been down there for 26 years. And with all the restaurants that I've owned down there are nights when I drive down there and storms, rain, bad weather. There's not a single person on the patio down there, and I'm full. The energy that it provides down there, the visual from the street, whether you're a pedestrian or in your car. My Christmas decorations just went in yesterday, huge Christmas trees and other Christmas decorations. It's unbelievable. So it is a huge amenity. So, from a business standpoint, I haven't had one complaint from a guest. I'm packed every single night. I'm on a waiting list every night. I'm booked for Thanksgiving reservations, New Year's Eve. I stand here tonight thinking, why do I need to spend any money doing anything? But I understand from an approval standpoint, I am willing to compromise. I have to change the roof, the sides, have some architectural features. I mean, I want to be at that location for a very, very long time. I want people looking at that structure and walking by and saying, man, that's a beautiful structure. One of the downsides that I have is that when it does rain, I don't have the ability to open those glass sides and open and close them. So when it is 90 degrees outside, we have fans. I do open one side permanently during the summer. I would like to change those windows so that I could basically have panels that I could open and close, so that on those nice nights I could do that. It's gonna be very expensive to do that, but those are one of the things that I need to do. So that's where we are. I think overwhelming. Again, the comments. I think even tearing the thing down. I think honestly, I truly believe the city of Dublin would have a black eye by doing that. Your residents and your visitors right now overwhelmingly love what we're doing down there, and I think they would think that everyone is crazy if that structure actually were to come down. The patio is 3,000 square feet. It's not in anyone's best interest. It's 1,800 square feet. To me, it is absolutely, I wanted it to have the structure bigger than it is now. It's absolutely an appropriate size for the patio. It's 3,000 square feet. That structure is 1,800 square feet. It kind of threw us here for a curveball. That 25% going down to 1,200 would actually make it look kind of silly, I think, out there. It'd be unusual. Right now, I think as far as the space that's inside, it doesn't feel big and it doesn't feel small. It feels appropriate. And I think we want things to feel appropriate. So I did have lunch at RH. I don't know how many of you have been to Restoration Hardware at Easton. They have actually a rooftop structure that I'm not going to say is similar to this, but in some aspects it is. They have a glass roof, which I proposed in 2020, and thank God I did not do a glass roof. And talking to their general manager and two of their employees, they said a glass roof is a nightmare. During the day, that sun beats on you, and they constantly have to move people within their dining room. Now, at night, obviously, with a glass roof, it's nice, but during the day, it's a nightmare. So I don't think having a glass roof is really an option. So, yeah. So I'm here to compromise, listen. I know this is not going to be an easy process, but I'm here, want to hear your comments and want to work with you.
Questions for the applicants? I have a question, and that's why I asked the staff to talk to the chief building official. Have you engaged a design professional to look at the difference between what you have and the building code requirements? Because I think he just drew on a few of them. But if you look at that energy requirement and that energy analysis, that's going to impact your walls, may impact your glazing, may impact. So, I mean, to keep that structure, even if it was approved by this body,
yeah,
I mean, the cost. I just think that's an important step. And if you're
saying that I'd be worried about the cost of
well,
change.
I'm just saying, are you aware? I think because we could go down this route and approve something, and then the building department's very clear about what you have to do. And by the time you impose the standards for the building code, because it's a radically different standard for a temporary building, and for this, for a real building,
Yeah.
it could come back looking completely different. So you could go through this process and then have to go through it again because you find the costs are so onerous to do the things you might have to do. So I just suggest you may want to get on that track now while you're doing this, because if you have a limited amount of time.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned about it because, you know, I'm going to be there for 20 or 30 years. The impact that structure has on that business. I mean, again, terminating people every year is not fun. Losing half your sales every year is not fun. This has really been the first year where the business really has been very healthy, not only from an employee standpoint, management standpoint. Now, we don't do the same amount of sales that we do during the summer because we have, we're able to open some sides. We actually the city has been nice enough to allow us to open up the alley to the south. We've had seats out there. So I think our sales have gone down by 10%, maybe 15%. That's not devastating. But our sales are at a point now where it's been fantastic. So I'm not going to sit here and say that there isn't a number out there that would maybe make this a little ridiculous, but as long as the main structure stays there, trying to tear that down and start over again, it doesn't seem real logical. So as long as we keep the existing structure there and then improve on the sides and the roof, that makes a lot of sense. And I don't think that's going to be overly costly. Plus, look, if it enhances that structure architecturally and makes it even more appealing to the outside, I'm going to be busier long term. That's an investment I'm willing to make as long as it's reasonable. Why wouldn't I do that? So I'm not overly concerned about that.
Mr. Alexander, a great point and suggestion, and I think we would be well served to start understanding that. There's a lot of chicken or the egg here for us, and so we wanted to come here and get your general support first, and then we'll certainly roll up our sleeves on those sorts of items.
And in fairness, I don't know if Amy was a part of the board when you came before us, but the scale of what you presented a number of years ago was different than what you've built now.
It is.
So I don't think they're necessarily comparable.
Very different.
And I think that was part of the resistance that you were hearing at that time.
Yeah.
Was the
Substantial.
height and the scale of what was proposed. So I just want to get that out there.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, okay.
I mean, generally, as you say, I somehow feel like I could agree with moving forward. I mean, one of the things is about having sensitive infill. I mean, for me, what's it going to look like? Because certainly there's no way it really fits the code. I'll say the design requirements that sit inside what the requirements require. So I have to find a way, and I'm having a hard time visualizing what those high quality materials and how does it fit in there. I think you can find a way because I think it's smaller than it was, and I think it fits a bit better in the space than, because I read the history, Gary, where you had some challenges.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't make it subordinate. It's in the front, right? You can't do certain things, but trying to find a way where it fits more to the Bri-High you got going south, and then you have Harvest going north, and just how the thing fits in there. What's the landscaping look like? Because now, I mean, it's nice, but when you see it, it looks.
Well, yeah,
I mean, you don't say it's a tent, but it looks like a tent, right? So.
Right, and I think landscaping is very important. We have a professional landscaping company that comes in and does a lot of stuff for us every year. So if we add more landscaping, that's great.
Yeah, but I'm having a hard time visualizing how it's gonna really. But the scale for me is better.
Maybe it would be helpful for you and for us if we just went through the conditions of approval. Is that okay, or did you have more you wanted to make in your initial presentation? Because we'll probably have questions as we go through these.
No.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. So if we look at the conditions, I think the first one is pretty standard. And that's the roof pitch is. Where is the roof now in terms of meeting this requirement? Okay, so we don't know. So that's what's in our code, and I don't know if it's possible to have a span that wide, stay under 18, and have a 612 pitch. So, but it is what's stated in the code, right? Yeah, so we're just saying that whatever structure results, if we're going to keep this in here. I have a feeling, looking at the rest of the board members, that I don't hear anyone wanting to take that out.
I'll just say up front that I'm completely against the concept. So whatever else goes out in this, to me, there's absolutely no way that if this accessory structure was asked by any other applicant in the historic district that we would say yes. And I don't want to set the precedent that every restaurant now is going to ask for that. It doesn't meet the historic design guidelines in any way whatsoever. It has no floor. I could go through all of it, but I'll just say that I'm a no straight up, so you can go through the rest of the conditions all day. I won't have any other comments.
All right, so you're going to, so regardless of what comes out, we know we have a no vote. Okay, well, let's still go through the rest of them. Because if we do vote on this, well, we will vote on it. Okay, so the rest of us are comfortable keeping condition 2 in? Yes?
You just said we would vote on it, but they could also choose to withdraw or not ask us to vote tonight on this.
They could.
So that they could go talk to engineering about what kind of requirements are going to be made, because I will be honest, I think the idea of an addition, and it may have the same problems because it's in the front, but I look to the staff, it just seems like when you have an accessory structure, we're getting, as Amy pointed out, way beyond what we would consider normal in the historic district, so.
Nowhere near what we'd approve, anywhere.
Does the architectural character of the building that it's in front of impact your feelings about it?
You can't even see the existing building
Yeah,
with this.
Right, but that's my point. The quality of that compared to other, is that building considered a contributing structure in our?
It is a contributing structure within our historic district.
Okay.
And where they're asking to put an accessory structure in the front, completely covering a contributing building in the historic district. And I can't see anywhere else in our district where we would allow that. And we're giving them a waiver to make it even bigger than an accessory structure we would allow anywhere in our district. And would we allow an accessory structure that doesn't have a floor anywhere in our district? This has no floor.
Certainly, this property it's unique in the setback of the existing building, right? I mean, that I think, I find it difficult to believe we could put an addition on this thing that really didn't cover this thing in the first place. If it was a building addition rather than an accessory structure, it's the condition we inherited.
I mean, what else are there's lots of other options, right? But this is the option before us today. And I'm just saying there's nowhere in our district, I can't see anywhere in our city where we would approve this as a permanent building, an accessory building. I mean, come back, tell me you want a roof over your patio so the poor people don't have to take their stuff in when it rains. Okay, but this is totally different. You're asking for a building, an accessory structure in the historic district that doesn't meet our code in any way whatsoever.
I really think you get to see that architectural portion of it. If you even go back on your website and look at pictures that are on there 2 to 3 years back, and look at that compared to what that tent structure is there now, it really is eye-opening when you look at, it looks great with the patio and the tables and the building. And then you go and look at it now. I know it looks nice with the landscaping and stuff, but if you go back and look at look at the pictures of your that are still out there for customers to see, that really does show that architectural impact of that high street area. So, I'm a lot like Amy. It's taken away from what we're trying to reinforce down there, the architecture we've got.
I mean, I don't doubt that it's successful and that people love it and people are going to think we're crazy for taking it down. It's a huge benefit to you. I understand that. but I'm looking at it from a
Well,
code perspective.
but I think, when you say it's benefited to me too, again, if you want me to marshal your Dublin residents, I mean, I would think that the board's responsibility too would be to your residents that live in the district, and overwhelmingly, your residents love what's going on down there in the district as a whole.
But just because the residents want to break the code and the law doesn't mean we should let them.
I would say, don't go down that
I
path.
was like, don't go down that
Don't go down that path, because
I said they might be mad at us for taking it down and they can't now sit outside in January, but we're asked to follow a code. We just rewrote the historic district code. We have it very set, and we can't break it just because people are going to be not happy that they can't sit outside in January. And honestly, they're not sitting outside anymore. It's becoming a permanent building. It's no longer outdoor dining. It's a building with walls.
Well, you have people sitting on the patios in the district at night in vinyl tents that they're adjacent to strip centers. I mean, they're in the district sitting outside on patios.
Temporary structures.
No, they're permanent but they're in vinyl tents in strip centers right across the street. My patio blows those away, and I don't have vinyl sides, I have glass sides, and I'm willing to architecturally make this very architectural pleasing. The Avenue, the Pearl, okay, Cap City have vinyl patios, okay? These aren't quality looking patios. They seat them at night during the winter, okay? You can't really see through, it's plastic. And my patio is professionally landscaped with glass.
They're also not in the historic district anymore.
Well, they're in the district.
They're not in the historic
They're
core.
in the district.
They're not in the historic core.
Okay.
If you look at our map and our guidance, the Pearl is not in the historic core.
They're also a different kind of structure relative to the primary building they're a part of. You're right. And
I get it.
and
But it's a strip center.
Well, we did approve those, but they're secondary to the structure they're in, and so that's why
Yeah, this is a
they actually
free-
could fit in our code because of that.
Yeah.
Okay. This is on, yeah. Tom Holton, 5957 Roundstone Place. I'm a strong advocate, as you know, for the historic district and overall. And even though I recognize that the structure in front of the Tucci's building is not permanent now, it has been approved, although it does have a sunset date. It is in front of a building which itself is not historic in the sense of the buildings, let's say, on the south side of High Street, of Bridge Street, because it was built in 1955 as for a flooring business. So it doesn't have any historic, well, it was a flooring company. It's not a historic building in itself, only by its age. So the structure is not hiding something that is historically interesting. It's in itself. We're not losing something by having a temporary structure in front of it. You're not losing the site of an historic building, as you would if you were putting a structure like this in front of the firehouse on 37 North West Bridge. That would be very different. Or a temporary structure in front of 56 North High, what we used to call Raisin Head, now North High Brewing. That would be very different. And I think the board in those cases would be entitled to say, nope, don't put one there.
We did have the firehouse come before us with a
I know
proposal.
you did, but not with a structure like this. It was a separate standalone structure. And thank you for not approving that, by the way. But as Ms. Holt mentioned, when this structure was approved, it was so that we can have more activity on North High Street. And it did allow more activity along with the bridge being open, and of course, more development along North High Street with Bridge Park West. And the more people you can have on anywhere on North High Street, the more likely you are to have some of that activity on South High Street, especially once they get rid of some of the construction going on. But with the wine store and others coming online, we'll have more people having lunch, dinner, meals at Tucci's, and then walking down to South High Street, and that's good for the historic district. So the more people we can have at somewhere like having dinner at a lunch or dinner, any meal at somewhere like Tucci's, that's good for the historic district, and it's good for Dublin. So the larger the structure that can be approved, I know it doesn't look, maybe it's not as, you don't like the large structure, but the more people we can have in the historic district, the better it is for the historic district, and the better it is for Dublin overall. It's an economic driver, if you will, if that's a good term to use. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do we want to continue? Oh, it looks like you want to add something to that?
No.
Okay, all right, okay. Here, if we go through, the staff has structured this so that this document, however we amend it, if we at least vote on it, if it passes, it at least gives them the opportunity to proceed in a way that we have said you could proceed. So I would like to go through all of these and then see if there's a motion to vote on it. Is that agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so Sarah's already mentioned the roof material shall be standing seam. And feel free to, you've already told us about the waiver, but if there are other issues as we go through these and as we're discussing, I think it's worthwhile to then have your input on that item too. Okay, we've talked about the entry off of North High Street. You've said you're willing to entertain that.
Sure.
Foundation plantings, you've mentioned landscape, your evergreens, you can handle that. The number 6 is pretty broad and it covers a lot of areas. And so, I think it's going to require more than just the treatment on the front changing, but I think the whole structure has to have some compatibility with the district.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is, my hope tonight was just to come in and get some feedback. I mean, this report was just done recently, was to get with my architect and then go through the district, whether that was buildings at Cohatch or, other materials and structures down that exist there, and then come back with some compelling features and suggest some of those things.
Okay, so did we have I lost the list. What's item 7? Okay. Okay, we've talked about the gable ends. Vinyl's not approved material, so, and that's a part of all the material requirements identified in 6. Furniture, lighting. So you see item 8. You have any questions with item 8? Now that's pretty standard. We've done that with any exterior dining. You want 9 stricken from this, is that right?
I think that's been added as something we requested this evening.
Mix.
And we're going to have
Right. Okay, yeah, now I'm sorry, I didn't read the whole thing. Okay.
I'd say a waiver request, if deemed to be required. I'd like to make my argument to Mr. Boggs that it may not be, but it may be by some other means, is all my point, that we're
Right.
making a request.
Or just, we could make it general, that issue will be dealt with at a later date?
Right. The appropriate request for final approval of square footage will be made with the next submittal. And that'd be
Perfect.
open-ended, whether it's a waiver or some other means of doing that.
Okay.
You said that we thought there was clear understanding about the number 4, which is the front entrance. Did you, as the owner, think that a front entrance was going to be a problem? Is that
I mean, a front entrance there would be problematic. I mean, I'm willing to do it, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to do that.
could you further explain that?
Well, we already have two entrances right now that work well, and that, you know, with a patio and an operation like that, you want some flow. Typically, that north entrance there are tables there. That's where the band plays during the summer, and to march people right through the middle of that dining room on busy nights would be very problematic for just daily operations. You have already that side north entrance, which is very convenient for the back parking garage coming through Darby, or if the front through North High Street. You've also got the alley on the south where you come through the tent area, the patio structure, through the side there. So you really only need two entrances. To add a third one doesn't make a lot of sense. But again, if that's the difference between being approved or not approved, I would do it. But for the
I
operation,
think the question becomes, is it an operational issue or an aesthetic issue? And if it's an aesthetic issue, we can certainly accommodate it. The operational one's the more difficult. But
Well, it's both aesthetic and it helps animate the streetscape, but there's no reason it has to be in the middle either. You could have access off the front, but it could be in a corner. And then you could have both side and front, but you'd have the visibility. So the goal is to try to get as much activity out of the street.
that's true. We can look at that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it could come off right off the street and then go back to your north entrance.
Yeah.
Mr. Boggs, is language 9 okay with you?
Yes, I'm okay with that language.
Okay.
And just for me, just because it's hard for me to visualize, I mean, I get Amy's point also, but to visualize what's going, so rendering something that you can really kind of see materials that it could be would be, for me, would be important that the next time we look at this. And, you know, what does it look like if you, I don't know, you're going to look through it, you're going to look around it, is it going to be all glass? I'm struggling a little bit just to see how it's going to fit sitting in that kind of, you have one Bryha on one side, you have Harvest on the other, you have your building in the back, just how it fits in that whole, how it looks, huh?
And just be aware, you want to consolidate the next two approvals.
Yep.
So the amount of information you have to provide, the kind of detail that Sean's talking about is substantial.
It's a great point. It's interesting to me that in more recent years, not only before this board, but in other places in Dublin, you have to do a concept plan that gets voted upon. And it used to be the concept plans were more of an informal process. And so to me, what I'd like to do is have a vote just to let us proceed and fight another day. It may very well be that we find, because we do have a little bit of time, not a lot, but that we come before you next with not just like you suggested to the last applicant, with some ideas and more on an informal basis, so we don't have to go to the expense of taking a big guess if we're right or wrong. And maybe that'd be the right thing to do, to have an interim step.
I think we all
Yep, that'd be helpful.
would agree with that. All right, are there any more questions for the applicants or staff regarding this? Do you have any more questions for us?
I think we're good.
Okay. Sarah, are we missing anything?
Sorry, I might just mention that engineering had requested, sorry, I keep losing this. Engineering had requested that right-of-way be shown on the next submittal. And I believe that made it into the staff report and perhaps not onto the presentation.
Can you add that to the, I think bullet point 2, it's not up, but doesn't bullet point 2 ask for the survey?
It is part of recommended condition number 1.
Okay, so it's.
And I can add that in right now.
Okay.
I can't type very well, but I can change that when it's applicable, public right-of-way.
We won't have motion 1 to vote on. Do we need to modify the language of motion 2 because we've identified 9? It says we're voting on something with 8 conditions.
So it would be 9 now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. Okay. All right.
One just last, I'm sorry. Here again, I just want to reiterate, we have no preconceived notions that your approval tonight means you're rubber stamping anything, but we do want to fight another day, and we think conceptually we've heard you. We can take these things. It was constructive. So we ask for your support to just give us another shot at this when we come back.
But you've also heard the square footage issue too, right?
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right, yes, and to be clear, whether the appropriate procedural vehicle is a waiver request or some other method, ultimately that square footage is subject to board approval.
It could be a variance for all I know, but I just need more time to figure it out and work with that.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right, board members, is there a motion to, is there any, I know we've already heard from Mr. Holton. Did we have any online or anything submitted?
We did not.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the project with the 9 conditions that we've identified?
So I can move to approve the concept plan with the 9 conditions.
I'll second that.
Lori?
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Yes?
No.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right. Next, we move on to communications. I know the one issue that has been identified are the meeting dates. The meeting dates for next year were identified in our packet. Did everyone have a chance to see these dates and just check calendars and make sure they're okay?
And then, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, you have a revised meeting date list in front of you, and that addresses the typo for the February 23 date.
February.
Yeah,
I know, don't think about it too much.
I noticed when I
know.
was plotting them out, I'm going, that's a Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's been addressed.
All right.
Okay, so it's actually
22nd.
February 20,
It is February 23.
it's February 22nd, right?
You're talking
Yes,
about,
of
okay,
2023.
You're talking about two different. You're
Of-
talking about two different
Yeah,
things.
right.
We're, yes, for 2023.
It's February 22nd.
That's right.
It's correct on the revised list.
Yes,
This one.
that's right.
Okay. All right. So seeing no apparent conflicts, is there a motion to approve the recommended dates?
Oh, I can, I make a motion to approve the 2022 to 2023 meeting dates for the board.
Well, I'll second that motion.
Lori?
Ms. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper? Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Any other communications?
Quite a number of them, actually. Before you on your desks are 2 historic district flyers. Some of you just have one. There's one that is kind of a trifold. That is just a print proof. If you remember back when we were talking about the penalty code and creating a more enforceable and meaningful stick part of the code, we also talked about creating a more carrot type approach where we proactively reminded people that they own historic structures, that there's a process for most changes to them, and that staff is here to help. And so we developed 2 separate flyers. One, which is the trifold sort of cardstock flyer, will go out to new property owners from the CPI welcome packet. And then the second item, which is more of a letter type, will go out on an annual basis from the planning department, just as that annual reminder and hi, we're here, don't forget about us. So I just wanted to share those with you and let you know that we've made great progress, and it was a lot of fun working with CPI to develop these both. The next item, you all have copies of the new design guidelines, hard copies.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So those are for you to keep. And then I will offer a reminder to you that the bios and edits to existing bios are due back to me on the 1st of December. This is for the annual report so that we can put this together. If you're new on the board, you'll need to create that bio from scratch, please. And if you want to update your existing bio, please feel free to do that and let me know by the 1st. And then the final item is a photo of everybody. And maybe I took one earlier of you all in action, and usually we do more of a staged one kind of in front of the dais, if we could do that as well, and then that will be included in the annual report.
Did you review the one you took of us in action? It wasn't like,
I'm sure it was perfect. I'm sure it was just perfect, but we will use the most appropriate one.
you should have taken 10. You know you're supposed to take 10 when you take a picture. Boom, boom, boom.
We can certainly take another one of you behind the dais, and then we can have everybody come up.
I want to be stage ready.
All right, do we want to do that now?
Please.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you should get it on and. I got dressed up for this moment.
Did you want to adjourn?